Dan Graziano, ESPN National NFL Insider, also hosting NFL Live today at 4 Eastern, joining us here in the Man Cave. Look at that. Hosting.
Whatever they need.
Yeah?
That's my
Okay, but the difference of being an analyst, and now all of a sudden you're the host who has to tee up the analyst.
Yeah, it depends on the show. Like when I'm hosting Get Up, that's a lot more sort of conversational. Like, you can kind of, I think NFL Live, just the way it's structured right now, just the format of the show is a little more sort of station to station, sort of, tee up the analyst and then maybe one will follow the other, that kind of thing. So just, it really does depend on the show. And I think, Live's fun. I mean, it's good. I do enjoy it. There's no question about it. But Get Up has been where I've spent most of my time the last couple of years. And it just kind of, you maybe just feel more comfortable where you spend more time. So.
Yeah, you're in the same area. You just move over a seat or two, and then
exactly
next thing you know, you're asking questions.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like I think if you do the show enough, you have a feeling. Like if we're going to move you over to this chair today. Well, you have a sense of what you would want to be asked and how you would want to be involved in the conversation if someone else was hosting. So yeah, for sure.
The big headline, or at least waiting to be a big headline, is the suspensions for gambling here with the NFL. Why is it vague on the NFL's part of who can, who can't, where you can, where you can't? Why not just make it a blanket? Nobody is allowed to gamble.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not vague. It's spelled out, but it is complex, right? Like if you're a player, you're allowed to bet on other sports. If you're a coach or a front office executive, you're not, right? So why are players allowed? It wasn't collectively bargained. It's not because of the union. So why are players allowed to bet on other sports? Why are you allowed to bet from home but not at the team facility or on the team bus or in the team hotel? So it is all spelled out. It hasn't changed in at least 5 years. I mean, the most updated gambling policy is from 2018, and it's the same as it was then. So, I think the league has found – I think the league and the union thought it was all more obvious than it turned out to be. And I think that's why there's been a little more of a re-education effort here over the last couple of months, because they don't want to be suspending people for the whole year. I mean, that's lousy for the games. So, it's I have not heard any talk about amending or reforming the gambling policy, but they do want to make it clearer to the players what is and isn't allowed.
And you're talking about maybe year-long suspensions here. I don't know if they brought Calvin Ridley to the rookie symposium. I mean, they had Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Calvin Ridley would resonate.
Oh, you mean this last one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, because that guy lost $11 million betting $1,500.
That's what because when the other suspensions hit a few months ago, the Detroit Lions once, like Calvin Ridley just happened. Like, how can this not be fresh in your mind? Calvin Ridley is a big enough name that did not get ignored. And everybody knows he got suspended for a whole year. So, it's alarming for sure. And I do the league has started to kind of get out there and try and get in front of these guys and say, here's the rules in case you didn't already know. But I remember talking to the players union after the Lions suspensions came down. Do you feel like you guys are doing? Yes, we are doing enough. We talk to these guys multiple times a year. We lay it out. These guys are not doing this because they don't know the policy. They're doing it because they thought they'd get away with it. So that's the perspective from the people who are in charge.
Well, wait until it's a quarterback,
right?
Because these are guys who are on the periphery. They're the backup linebacker, kick returner. You get a quarterback in there now. All of a sudden, remember when Tony Romo wanted to have
the fantasy thing,
a fantasy thing in Vegas?
But that was right before this sort of tidal wave of legalized gambling state by state, and also sort of the NFL's embrace of.
Before the NFL realized how much money they were going to make on this, is the NFL hypocritical?
How so?
In handing out punishment
while making money off of gambling? Yeah, I think it's important that you police your players and your personnel in terms of their gambling habits, because you do not want to go down that road of inside information, right? And now you have these guys might have an advantage, and that might affect other people's ability to gamble and make money. So I think it's fair to hold the people that work in the NFL and play in the NFL to a little bit of a higher standard, right, than the people you're advertising to, right, if you're using gambling. So I do think there is reason and incentive for the league to take a little bit of a stronger stance with their own personnel than they would expect from the general public that's consuming their advertising.
Dan Graziano, ESPN National NFL Insider, hosting NFL Live today at 4 Eastern. I don't know how well you know the makeup of this Jets team now. I know covering them for a long, long time in the New York media, but you bring in Aaron Rodgers and you got a young team. Expectation level is really high.
Yeah.
So they're not a curiosity, cute story. Now it's your playoffs and, maybe deep in. How does Hard Knocks affect that?
I always feel like teams are overreacting when they don't want to do Hard Knocks. 'Cause I've been to training camps where there's been Hard Knocks and there's more cameras, right? But it's not, they're not like, there's not a camera right over you as you're trying to catch the ball in practice. You know what I mean? I don't think it's as big a deal. I think it's about teams and, coaches and front offices wanting to sort of control the flow of news, right? Which, and now you're like, well, we have cameras here. Something might get out that we otherwise might not have wanted to, even though I'm sure they have total approval.
They do. They
right.
have total control.
So I just think it's a matter of this is one other thing we don't want to have to deal with. It takes away time from but I do not believe it matters that much. The Lions last year went all in. I mean, you could tell they were loving every second of it, and they had.
But that's the coach who embraced it.
Yes,
I mean that's the difference.
But that's a difference.
And they didn't have a star player like Aaron Rodgers,
right? Who
might go, nah.
Who, by the way, is liable to maybe say something non-football related that makes news, right? Yeah. And so, I think that is a little bit of a concern for them. I don't know that it needs to be. The Lions had a fine season last year. I mean, they were this close to making the playoffs. I don't think there's a correlation between doing Hard Knocks and having a disappointing season. I think the Jets will be fine, if that's how it ends up.
Are you all in on the Jets here?
The Jets have decided that they were Aaron Rodgers away from being a Super Bowl contending team, right? They went 7-10 last year with quarterback play that was not just bad, was actively harmful to their chances of winning the games, right? So if you have a guy who's just competent, you could see getting to 9-10 wins. If you have Aaron Rodgers playing at the MVP level he was at 2-3 years ago, you could see getting to 13 wins, right? So I think my question is, are they right? Are they right about how good their roster already was, absent Aaron Rodgers or a competent quarterback? The tackle situation is a little bit concerning because they're counting on guys that haven't been available. Mekhi Becton was a top 10 pick. If he plays like that, they're probably going to be great. But he's only played one game the last 2 years. Yeah. So that there are question marks about it. And Rodgers is 39. Like, it's not, he shows up to OTAs and he pulls a calf muscle on the first day. I don't think that's going to continue to bother him into the season, but it's an alarm bell. Right? Like, it reminds you that the guy we just brought in is not 25 years old. Like, he might be more liable to get hurt. We might have to be more careful with him. So all in that conference, in that division, I can't get all the way there on the Jets, but I do expect them to be a good team.
It's weird that I thought that they overachieved while underachieving greatly at the quarterbacking position.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that they weren't a 7-win team, but they won 7 games. And they did that in spite of their quarterback. But I thought the other players sort of overachieved just a little bit. So it was a weird feeling that I had with them. Not that, man, imagine if they had a competent quarterback. I mean, they may be a 10-win team here.
They may be. I mean, they may also, like, everything breaks right, and he plays out of his mind, and Becton plays 17 games and looks like a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
They have the offensive rookie of the year. They have the defensive rookie of the year. They get Quinnen Williams' contract figured out. I mean, their defense does look really good, so there's reason to be optimistic. I just think that the AFC is just going to be, like a knife fight. Like, I mean, there's so many good teams. There's so many great quarterbacks. Like, I just don't know that in the AFC East that's going to produce a 12, 13-win team, given how good everybody is.
Are you more sold on the Eagles repeating or the Niners repeating their success?
Well, I have to say the Niners, because no one has repeated as NFC East champion in 19 years, right? Like, that is, and I when my first job at ESPN was the NFC East blogger. Remember, they had division bloggers. So I mean, I've lived it. I've seen it. Weird stuff happens. Like, you go back, was it 3 years ago? The Eagles were defending champions. Everything looked good. Carson Wentz Carson Wentz forgot how to play football. Like, the Eagles just bottomed out. That was the year that Washington won it at 7-9. And there was no reason for the Eagles not to repeat, but, like, dark forces are at work in the NFC East that prevent it from happening. So I can't, in good conscience, knowing this, predict an Eagles repeat. I don't have another good reason not to, but something always happens. I'm telling you, something always happens. They laugh at me when I say it on shows, and then at the end of the year, no, Dan was right again. It's weird. I don't know. I'm supposed to be able to break it down and tell you like something's weird in the NFC East.
Yeah, you're too measured. You got to have hot takes. What's wrong with you?
Dark forces at work is not a hot enough. I thought that was pretty good. I'm not hearing that everywhere else. Eagles were what? They were healthy last year. You don't get necessarily the same injury luck year over year. I don't know. The Cowboys are probably good. I don't know. Something will happen. I'm telling you.
Yeah. It just feels like the NFC is top heavy, whereas the AFC
top heavy,
a little fuller.
You say Eagles, Niners. I think not enough people are paying attention to Seattle. I think Seattle might have a really good team this year. I don't think what Geno Smith did was necessarily a fluke.
Yeah.
I think he's that kind of player now, and what they have around him looks really, really good. And then, with the other two divisions, everyone's going to pick the Lions to win the North. The last time the Lions won their division was 1993. Like, let's see it, right? Like, I believe they're good. I think they'll be good, but boy, oh boy, like that's a lot of losing that they've done. So if the culture has really turned around under Campbell, they look like they should be the favorites there. And you can, flip a four-sided coin in the NFC South.
Covering the New York media, we all have like scars, horror stories. Do you have one that sticks out, that a moment, incident, run-in that you had
in New York?
Yeah.
Probably. I was just telling Paul, I was at that Mike Messina game in Fenway Park, where he was a strike away from a perfect game. That was a Sunday night baseball game.
Yes.
We're writing for newspapers. Like you had the game story written. It was Mike Messina throws a perfect game, and you had to file it as soon as it ended. Now all of a sudden there's a guy on base. It's 1-0. They could lose. Like that was wild. So baseball writing was just crazy. Like from that standpoint. In terms of a horror story,
but you weren't running into
badly.
You weren't running into crazy Yankee managers like I was.
No, we had Torrey. Torrey was very measured. Yeah, he yelled at me one time. It was so we had these fights about access. I was involved in the New York baseball writers chapter, and teams were closing the clubhouses for meetings at times that were supposed to be media access times. And at one point, I sent a letter to the commissioner's office about Torrey doing it too many times. And he came storming out the next day into the dock. Did you send a letter? Dropping F-bombs all over. Did you send a letter? In other words, I don't give you guys enough bleeping time out here every single day, blah, blah. And it was intense. And I was like, Joe, it's a clerical matter. If there's a stack of letters like this on the commissioner's desk at the end of the year about you closing the clubhouse, you're going to hear from him. If it's one letter, you're not. We got to make sure and log it. And he got it like instantly. Like I saw his face change. Like, all right, that makes sense. Next time, can you talk to me first? Sure, no problem, Joe. But he still kept doing it.
I remember going out there, and Billy Martin was the manager.
Well, that's a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'd smell alcohol in his breath.
Yeah, very different time.
Yes, and I was there when he got fired. I was there when he got rehired. I was there Mattingly's rookie season.
Uh-huh.
Like and I'm a kid from a small town in Ohio. Next thing I know, I'm at Yankee Stadium, and we're getting yelled at for walking on the grass.
Yes,
like you couldn't walk on the grass during BP.
Yeah,
you had to stay off the grass. That Steinbrenner would have guys. I don't know if they had rifles, but it felt like they were watching.
But I'm sure in a meeting, Steinbrenner asked, like, could we have rifles? And was told no. I think, my best manager stories are Jim Leland when I covered the Marlins down in Florida, like the 97, 98 Marlins. Like he was, because he went down there, signed a 5-year contract. Everything was good. Halfway through the year, they told him, like, at the end of the year, we're going to sell the team and trade everybody. So he sent his family back home. He slept in his office. He drank like a fish. Like it was and he was just, all over the map emotionally about it. And they won the World Series. They ended up winning the World Series. Yeah, he was a character, man.
The Bills situation.
Yeah,
bringing it back to football
sure.
with Sean McDermott.
Yeah,
getting a contract extension.
Mm-hmm.
What if they bow out early?
Well, I think the belief they have in McDermott as the guy who's kind of helped build what they have now, right? I mean, you remember what the Bills were, right? When McDermott got there, they hadn't been to the playoffs in 17 years. In a league where there's 5 new playoff teams every year, yes. The Bills had gone 17 years. So the fact that he's now a regular in the playoffs shows you that he's put something together that they obviously have a lot of belief in and faith in and a lot of gratitude for. So, no, I think, look, I don't think he's a coach that is a bad season away from the hot seat. I think he's seen as a guy that I mean, it was him that brought Brandon Beane in. Like McDermott has a lot of sway over what goes on there. So, yeah, I think they'd have to fall on some pretty hard times in order for him to end up in trouble.
It just felt like that the last 2 years, there was so much pressure that Josh Allen was taking the next step and the Bills were taking the next step. And I just thought they were putting too much pressure on him.
Yeah.
And asking him to do too much because I thought they were one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And
offensively, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No running game.
And then Dayball leaves.
Yes.
Go to the Giants. So Ken Dorsey, his first year as offensive coordinator, is a disappointment. So he's feeling some heat.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean they're I think they're still really good, right? But what are they going to be offensively? Obviously, Stephon Diggs is a little annoyed about some things that went on in the offense last year and wants to see it be different. But yeah, it's an important year for Dorsey. It's an important year for Allen. They are in a window right now where they should be competing for Super Bowl titles, and they haven't gotten to one yet.
Does anything change with the running back position on how the running back position can get paid financially?
I don't think so, because nothing's going to change in terms of, the wear and tear those guys endure. Nothing's going to change in terms of looking at replaceability. The Chiefs just won the Super Bowl with a 7th-round rookie at running back. I mean, and you see that all the time, right? You can find production at running back in the later rounds. I think what's going to change, you see these two guys that went in the first round this year, Robinson to Atlanta and Gibbs to Detroit. I think you're going to see the way they're used be important, right? Like they're going to be all over the field. They're going to be lined up. They're going to catch the ball. Like they're going to be third down weapons, that kind of thing. So maybe you get to a point where a guy pops and he is a Christian McCaffrey type, right? In terms of how he's used, not necessarily as good as McCaffrey, but in terms of how he's used. And then maybe that guy gets paid. But the grind it out between the tackles, running back, the Derrick Henry style guy, first of all, there aren't many of them anyway. And second of all, I just don't think teams want to invest because they don't last and because you can find guys that can do it for a lot cheaper all the time. So no, what could change would be if they reduced the length of rookie contracts from 4 years to 3. That would help running backs, I think. But, the next CBA is 7 years away, so I don't see that happening anytime soon that would help any of these current guys.
And it feels like you got to be a hybrid. You have to have one player who does two things. That it has to be Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Deebo Samuel. Can you do a couple of things? But the days of being a battering ram, it feels like those are over. Derrick Henry's going to be – we're going to look back on Derrick Henry and go, man, he was a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Almost like Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, but special and unique, right?
Yeah.
Like there were not other Adrian Petersons running around at the time that he was doing it. There aren't other Derrick Henrys, right? You see guys, Saquon Barkley's involved in the passing game. There are guys that are leaned on more than others, but no one's doing what the Titans have done with Derrick Henry in terms of usage.
But explain to me, the Giants were negotiating against themselves with Daniel Jones.
Yes.
Why not just franchise? Nobody was going to trade for Daniel Jones or give up 2 first-round picks for Daniel Jones. And they paid more for him. They could have used that money for Saquon Barkley. Then, you could keep everybody happy because Daniel Jones is going to be successful if Saquon Barkley is successful.
I agree with every single word you just said. I think they stretched too far for Daniel Jones. I think, I do think when you look at where they come from, right, the GM and the coach come from Buffalo. They never paid a running back there. They use different guys. I don't think they're that comfortable with the idea of committing whatever, $12, $13 million a year to Saquon Barkley. I just don't think they feel. Now, they may recognize he's a special player, and in this case, we need to do it because of his importance to Daniel Jones, et cetera. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily excited about doing it, right? So, I think if they had franchised Daniel and focused on signing Saquon, then they might have been able to sign him by now. But that also may have been for a number that they just don't think they should have to pay a running back.
Great to see you. Thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Dan Graziano, ESPN National NFL Insider. He'll be hosting NFL Live today at 4